So when you hear the phrase, the global financial system, what pops into your head? Is it some incredibly complex machine run by experts? Maybe it's a moral story about what we all owe each other. Or is it really just a high-stakes game of power? While the truth is, it's kind of all three. And in this explainer, we're going to dig into why.
I mean, really think about it for a second. Do you see it as those flashing numbers and complicated charts that seem to run our entire world? Or is it more like a system of promises, of debts, that basically holds our society together? Or, when you really peel back all the layers, is it all just about who has the power to write the rules? We're going to look at it from all three of these angles.
All right, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to look at the system as a machine by checking out its financial dashboard. Then we'll flip that whole idea on its head and explore the morality of money. From there, we'll pull back the curtain on some hidden mechanics with the world's emergency plumber. And finally, we'll see who really gets saved first when things go wrong in a hierarchy of trust.
Okay, first up, let's think of the financial system as this giant, complex machine. You can imagine a car dashboard, right? With all these experts staring at the dials, constantly checking the warning lights for any sign of trouble on the horizon.
So what are those warning lights flashing right now? Well, according to the U.S. Federal Reserve, this is what they're looking at. They're watching all the geopolitical tension and uncertainty around policy. They're worried about inflation that just won't go away, especially when the job market is also slowing down. And yeah, they're keeping a close eye on high interest rates and the risk that asset prices could just suddenly tank, maybe even triggered by all the hype and sentiment around AI.
And here's one of those little warning lights blinking pretty brightly. This chart shows us leverage. That's just the amount of debt being used to finance assets. And for life insurers, it's unusually high right now, in the top quarter of where it's been historically. But look at property insurers. They're at historic lows. See, this is exactly the kind of imbalance the experts are paid to spot.
Okay, here's another dial on that dashboard. The number of people falling behind on their credit card bills is just a little bit above the historical median. Seems like a simple, cold hard number, right? But what if it's not just a number? What if this little statistic is actually the tip of a much, much deeper moral iceberg?
This quote from the anthropologist David Graeber completely changes the game. He argues that money's real magic, its real power, is its ability to just strip away the human story, to turn complex moral questions into a simple math problem. It lets us justify things with a spreadsheet that, if you saw them in any other context, would seem, well, outrageous, obscene even.
So let's jump into our second perspective. This view says the financial system is not a neutral machine at all. Nope. It's actually a system of moral arguments. Arguments about who owes what to whom. And these are arguments that historically have often been enforced with violence.
Now, to really get this, we kind of have to tear up the story you probably learned in economics class. You know, the one where money was invented because people got tired of bartering nuts for berries? It's almost certainly a myth. The evidence suggests that real barter, when it did happen, was super tense. It was hostile. It happened between strangers who didn't trust each other, a situation that was, as Graeber puts it, hovering about an inch away from outright warfare.
Instead, history shows us two very different ways of doing things. On one hand, you have human economies. They're built on trust and relationships. You help your neighbor move, you don't send them an invoice afterwards. But then you have commercial economies, where every single debt is precise, calculable, and enforceable. It's the system that lets you pay what you owe, walk away, and the relationship is just over. And this is the brutal endpoint of that logic. When you replace human relationships with cold, impersonal math, you can frame the most devastating outcomes as just business. The debt is just a number on a page, and the human cost? Well, that's incidental. It's a truly chilling thought, and it leads us directly to our third and final perspective. Who actually controls the rules of this game? So now we get to the third view of the system. Not as a machine, not as a story, but as a game of power. And to really understand this, we need to meet the world's emergency plumber, the U.S. Federal Reserve, and its total control over the hidden wiring of the entire global economy.
Now, the main tool in this plumber's kit is something called a foreign exchange swap line, or FX swap line. I know, it sounds super complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Think of it as an emergency credit line of US dollars that the Fed can open up to another country's central bank whenever a crisis hits and dollars suddenly become really hard to find.
So here's how it plays out. A crisis strikes. Suddenly, banks outside the US just can't get their hands on the dollars they desperately need. So, boom, the Fed activates the swap line. The foreign central bank gets this massive loan of dollars.
It then immediately lends those dollars out to its own local banks. And just like that, the crisis is stopped in its tracks. The leak is plugged.
But, and this is the absolute crucial point, this emergency plumbing isn't available to everyone. So the real question becomes, who gets a lifeline when the whole system starts to break down?
The decision isn't just based on who needs it most. Not at all. Research shows it's a deeply geopolitical calculation. Does that country owe a ton of money to U.S. banks? Does it hold a lot of U.S. assets? Does it generally play ball with U.S. policy? Is it a key military ally? Basically, getting access is a reflection of your power and strategic importance to the United States.
And this table, it just lays out the hierarchy in black and white. At the very top, you've got this core group of close allies. They get unlimited access. In the middle, a few strategically important emerging markets get some limited access. And at the bottom, well, that's most of the world. They have no direct line at all. They have to go, cap in hand, to the International Monetary Fund. It's an explicit three-tiered system.
So which one is it? A machine, a story, or a game? Well, the answer, of course, is that it's all three of them, all at once. These aren't competing ideas, they're just different layers of the same incredibly complex reality.
Let's try to connect all the dots. The technical risks you see flashing on that dashboard, they're managed by those emergency plumbers. But the choices those plumbers make, who to save and who to let fail, are guided by a hidden map of power. And that entire massive structure is built on the moral stories we tell ourselves about what debt even is and who has an obligation to pay it back.
You see, in the end, the whole system, from a simple credit card payment all the way up to a central bank swap line, is built on promises. And that brings us to the final question, the one I want to leave you with. In a world of dashboards, stories, and power games, what are the promises that this global system should actually be made to keep?